of American Airlines.
The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 was, in 1979, one of the most technologically advanced commercial aircraft in the world. Introduced into service in 1971, this wide-body, three-engine jet was designed to compete directly with the Boeing 747. The DC-10 represented the cutting edge of American aerospace engineering, a symbol of progress, reliability, and the golden age of jet travel. The specific aircraft involved in Flight 191 was registered as N110AA, a DC-1010 variant, which was the original version of the DC-10 family optimized for domestic routes within the United States.
2 mile northeast, turn left at 90, maintain 4800.
Making it just over 7 years old at the time of the accident. In aviation terms, this was still a relatively young aircraft, well within its operational lifespan. The DC-10's design was distinctive and ambitious. Unlike the four-engine Boeing 747, the DC-10 featured 3 high-bypass turbofan engines, 2 mounted on pylons beneath the wings, and a third integrated into the base of the vertical stabilizer at the tail. Popular in the 1970s because it offered excellent performance while providing redundancy, the ability to continue flying safely even if one engine failed. The engines on N110AA were General Electric CF6-6D turbofans, each capable of producing 40,000 pounds of thrust, giving the aircraft exceptional power and climb performance. These pylons were not simple bolts or brackets, they were complex engineered assemblies designed to transfer enormous forces from the engine to the wing structure. Each pylon had to handle not only the weight of the engine, approximately 8,600 pounds, but also the thrust forces during takeoff and the aerodynamic loads during flight. Designed with multiple redundancies and subjected to rigorous testing and certification. Inside, the DC-10 was configured in a typical 2-class layout for American Airlines domestic service. The forward cabin contained first-class seating, offering passengers wider seats, more legroom, and premium service. Behind the first-class cabin, separated by a galley and lavatory area, was the economy class section, which comprised the majority of the passenger cabin. In total, this particular DC-10 could accommodate up to 270 passengers, though the exact configuration varied by airline. On this particular flight, the aircraft was carrying 258 passengers of varying ages and backgrounds, business people heading to Los Angeles for meetings, families beginning their Memorial Day weekend vacations, two pilots in the cockpit, a flight engineer who managed the aircraft's complex systems, and 10 flight attendants responsible for passenger safety and service. The flight crew of American Airlines Flight 191 represented the highest standards of professional aviation. The captain was Walter Lux, age 53, who's an exceptionally experienced pilot with American Airlines. Captain Lux had accumulated over 22,000 total flight hours during his career, an impressive figure that represented decades of flying experience across multiple aircraft types. Of those hours, more than 3,000 were specifically in the DC-10, making him intimately familiar with the aircraft's handling characteristics, systems, and procedures. Captain Lux had joined American Airlines in 1955, during the propeller-driven era of commercial aviation. From piston engines to jets, from basic navigation aids to sophisticated computerized systems. Methodical in his approach and deeply committed to safety. His experience included flights in various weather conditions to numerous airports across the United States and through countless routine and non-routine situations. The first officer was James Dillard, age 49, who served as the co-pilot and second in command. First Officer Dillard brought his own substantial experience to the cockpit, with over 9,000 total flight hours, including significant time in the DC-10. His role was to assist the captain in all phases of flight, manage communications with air traffic control,
This is your captain speaking.
The relationship between captain and first officer in a commercial cockpit is built on mutual respect, clear communication, and defined roles. Both pilots are fully qualified to fly the aircraft, but the captain has final authority for all decisions. Rounding out the cockpit crew was flight engineer Alfred Udovich, age 56. In the DC-10 and other complex aircraft of that era, the flight engineers served a crucial role that has since been eliminated in modern two-pilot cockpits.
We'll do our best to give you a smooth flight, so turbulence is always a possibility, and for that reason, it's company policy to recommend you.
And managing the aircraft's various systems: engines, hydraulics, electrical, fuel, pressurization, and more. The flight engineers panel on the DC-10 was a complex array of gauges, switches, and indicators that required constant attention and deep technical knowledge. Flight engineer Udovich had over 15,000 flight hours of experience. His expertise in aircraft systems made him an invaluable member of the crew, particularly during abnormal situations where quick diagnosis and response to system failures could make the difference between a minor incident and a major emergency. The three-person cockpit crew represented a combined total of over 46,000 hours of flying experience, a wealth of knowledge, skill, and professional judgment. In the cabin, 10 flight attendants were responsible for the safety and comfort of the 258 passengers. These professionals were trained not only in customer service, but more importantly, in emergency procedures,
Keep your latch strap securely fastened throughout the flight.
first aid, and passenger management during crisis situations.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we're boarding passengers seated in zones.
Flight attendants are a critical part of aviation safety, often serving as the first line of response in cabin emergencies. Like American Airlines Flight 191 was scheduled as a routine domestic service from Chicago, O'Hare International Airport to Los Angeles International Airport. This route was one of the busiest in the American Airlines network, flown multiple times daily with various aircraft types. The flight distance was approximately 1,745 miles.
Also, I'd like to invite group number 1. Please, ladies and gentlemen, have your boarding cards out and available. Group 1 is now boarding. And now I'd like to invite...
The Friday before Memorial Day weekend, one of the busiest travel periods in the United States. Airports across the country were filled with travelers beginning their long weekend, and airlines were operating near capacity. O'Hare, one of the world's busiest airports even then, was experiencing high traffic volumes with aircraft departing and arriving in rapid succession. This mid-afternoon departure would put the flight into Los Angeles in the early evening Pacific time, a popular arrival time for business travelers and tourists alike. The flight had been planned, filed, and prepared according to standard procedures. Flight plan filed with air traffic control, weather reviewed, fuel calculated, weight and balance computed, and all pre-flight checks completed. Weather conditions at Chicago O'Hare that afternoon were nearly perfect for flying. The sky was clear with excellent visibility extending for miles. Surface winds were light, blowing at only 5 to 6 knots from the east. Temperature was comfortable at approximately 65 degrees Fahrenheit. There were no weather systems in the area, no turbulence expected, and no significant weather between Chicago and Los Angeles that would affect the flight. From a meteorological standpoint, this was an ideal day for commercial aviation, exactly the kind of conditions pilots hope for.
Maintain 4,000. Runway 8 kilo. Position and hold.
The 32 designation indicates a magnetic heading of approximately 320 degrees, or roughly northwest. Runway 32R was 10,005 feet long and 150 feet wide, more than adequate for a fully loaded DC-10 departure. The runway surface was dry, in good condition, with no reported defects or issues. At approximately 3:02 p.m. Central Daylight Time, about 12 minutes behind schedule due to the high traffic volume, Flight 191
Runway 8 kilo. You're clear for takeoff.
and unremarkable. On busy days at major airports, minor delays are standard. The crew had completed all pre-takeoff checklists, verified that all systems were operating normally, and received their departure in their seats, seatbelts fastened, carry-on items stowed. Flight attendants had completed their safety demonstrations and taken their seats for takeoff. In the cockpit, Captain Lux was in the left seat serving as the pilot flying, meaning he would physically control the aircraft during takeoff and initial climb. First Officer Dillard was in the right seat as pilot monitoring, responsible for radio communications.
Keep your left strap securely fastened throughout the flight and visible to the cabin crew.
Watching the engine instruments and system gauges. But everything was proceeding exactly as it had thousands of times before on this same route, with this same aircraft type. No warning, no sense that anything was different about this departure. It appeared to be, in every respect, a completely routine flight. But routine was about to give way to catastrophe. First Officer James Dillard and Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich moved through their pre-takeoff checklist with the precision of thousands of previous departures. Each item was called, verified, and confirmed, a ritual as old as commercial aviation itself, designed to ensure that nothing was overlooked, nothing forgotten.
If the seatbelt sign is switched off, it's switched on.
Instruments set and cross-checked, engine instruments in normal ranges, flaps set to takeoff position, trim configured, anti-ice systems verified, transponder set, radios tuned to tower frequency. Every switch, every gauge, every setting was methodically reviewed. This was not mere routine. It was the foundation of aviation safety, the systematic verification that separated professional aviation from casual flight. Flight Engineer Udovich monitored his panel carefully, watching the 3 engine indicators for any anomalies. All 3 General Electric CF 6-6D engines were running smoothly, fuel flow normal, oil pressure and temperature within limits, hydraulic systems pressurized and functioning. The DC-10 systems were complex, but everything appeared exactly as it should. Whatever happened next, the DC-10 would be leaving the ground. Next came VR, the rotation speed, the speed at which the captain would pull back on the control column, raising the aircraft's nose and lifting the main landing gear off the runway. For this particular takeoff, considering the aircraft's weight and the ambient conditions, VR was 145 knots. First Officer Dillard's voice was steady, professional. VR 04:08 p.m. Central Daylight Time, just 2 seconds after the main gear left the runway. The left engine pylon of N11OAA failed catastrophically at its forward attachment point. The massive rear bulkhead, unweakened by an undetected crack that had been growing for weeks, finally gave way under the stress of rotation. The entire left engine and pylon assembly, weighing approximately 13,500 pounds combined, separated from the wing and tumbled upward and backward over the top of the wing. This was not a gradual failure, not a slow deterioration. This was a sudden, violent, complete separation of a major structural component from a flying aircraft. In the cockpit, the crew had no way to understand what had just happened. There was no procedure for this scenario, no checklist for complete engine separation. The aircraft shuddered violently. Warning lights illuminated across the instrument panel. The sound of alarms filled the cockpit. But critically, the pilots could not see the left wing from the cockpit. They had no visual confirmation of what had occurred. What they knew was this: something was terribly wrong with the left engine. What they did not know, what they could not know, was that the situation was far worse than any engine failure they had ever trained for. The separating engine and pylon did not simply fall away cleanly. As the assembly tumbled over the wing, it struck the leading edge, causing tremendous damage. The impact severed hydraulic lines that ran through the leading edge structure. It damaged the systems that controlled the leading edge slats, the extendable surfaces on the front of the wing that increased lift during takeoff and landing. Most critically, the separation severed electrical cables and hydraulic connections that controlled the left wing's leading edge slats. As the aircraft continued climbing, the crew followed their training for engine failure, maintain V2 speed, which for this flight was 153 knots. This speed was safe for a normal engine failure, with all other systems intact. The fire warning light for the left engine illuminated, not because of fire. The stick shaker, designed to warn pilots of an impending stall by vibrating the control column, may have activated on the captain's side, but not the first officer's, because the separation had damaged the captain's air data systems. However, the crew had approximately 20 seconds to diagnose an unprecedented emergency, identify the correct response, and execute it.
Turn right at 180 and maintain at 3000.
Never been trained for, never been imagined. Flight engineer Udovich, monitoring his panel, would have seen the left engine instruments fail completely, not showing a shutdown engine, but showing no data at all. This might have suggested total engine destruction, but even this information came too late to matter. By 3:04:30 p.m., the DC-10 had rolled past 90 degrees of bank. The wings were now nearly vertical. The nose, initially pointing upward in a climb, 30-story building. At this point, the laws of physics had taken over completely. Even if the crew had somehow understood exactly what was happening, even if they had known about the slat asymmetry and applied full power to the remaining engines, while pushing the nose down to accelerate, there was not enough altitude remaining to recover. The aircraft was too low, too slow, too far into the stall, and too committed to its fatal trajectory. The final 5 seconds of American Airlines Flight 191 were a descent that no human intervention could arrest. The DC-10 struck the ground in an open field adjacent to a trailer park in Des Plaines, Illinois. The aircraft was inverted.
We have a report of an occupied structure fire. Confirm the victims on second floor. All units respond. Dispatch requesting medvac at scene.
Within hours of the crash of American Airlines Flight 191, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, were on scene in Des Plaines, Illinois. The NTSB is an independent federal agency responsible for investigating civil aviation accidents in the United States. Their mission is not to assign blame or determine liability, but rather to discover the factual circumstances of accidents and develop safety recommendations to prevent future tragedies. The scene that confronted investigators that evening was devastating. The impact had created a debris field covering several acres, with wreckage scattered across an open field and into the adjacent trailer park. The intense post-crash fire had consumed much of the aircraft structure, melting aluminum, destroying systems, and obliterating potential evidence. The investigation team knew immediately that this would be one of the most complex and challenging cases in aviation history. However, amid the destruction, one critical piece of evidence remained intact and identifiable: the left engine and pylon assembly. Unlike the rest of the aircraft, which had been destroyed in the impact and fire, the separated engine had fallen into a different area, a parking lot approximately 650 feet northwest of where the main wreckage came to rest. The engine and its attached pylon structure were damaged from the fall, but they were substantially intact and available for detailed examination. This discovery was immediately significant. It confirmed what some witnesses had reported. The engine had not simply failed or caught fire, it had completely separated from the aircraft during takeoff. Thus, this was an unprecedented event in commercial aviation. Engines were designed with multiple redundancies and fail-safes precisely to prevent complete separation. The fact that it had happened meant something had gone catastrophically wrong, not just with the engine itself, but with the fundamental structure that attached it to the aircraft. The investigation team established several working groups, each focused on specific aspects of the accident: structures, systems, power plants, operations, human performance, and survival factors. Hundreds of investigators, engineers, metallurgists, and specialists would eventually participate in the investigation. On December 21, 1979, nearly 7 months after the crash of American Airlines Flight 191, the National Transportation Safety Board released its final report on the accident. The document, spanning hundreds of pages of technical analysis, witness testimony, metallurgical examination, and engineering studies, represented one of the most comprehensive aviation investigations ever conducted up to that time. The NTSB's findings were clear, detailed, and damning, not of any individual, but of a system of assumptions, procedures, and oversights that had allowed a catastrophic situation to develop undetected. Where the National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of this accident was the asymmetrical stall and the ensuing roll of the aircraft. The names of the victims represent a cross-section of American life in 1979. Business executives and factory workers, families and solo travelers, their children and elderly, people from diverse backgrounds united only by their presence on Flight 191 that day. Their loss was mourned not just by their immediate families, but by communities across the nation. Visual, memorial plaque with respectful close-up. No individual names shown to protect privacy. Among the passengers were several notable individuals whose deaths made headlines, as we remember American Airlines Flight 191. We honor the victims not only with memorials and moments of silence, but with the safer skies their loss helped create. May they rest in peace, may we never forget, and may we continue learning.